Hello and welcome. Today we are going to react to another Adam Neely video. I think Neely makes a lot of great content that's worth discussing, so let's dive right on in. I'm Dr. Zach. Grab a cup of tea and join me. Okay, so today we'll be talking about the music theory of TikTok Sea Shanties. So this was made in January 19th, 2021, so almost a year ago now. But I've actually kind of started to hear some more sea shanties pop up again. So I thought this might be an interesting topic to look at with almost this little bit of a resurgence happening. So let's see what Adam Neely has to say.
So TikTok shanties are big right now. Like anything on TikTok, this has perplexed the millennials to no end, giving us millennial hot takes like sea shanties are an expression of tender masculinity, and sea shanties are about colonialism, slavery, and whale slaughter. And while I don't necessarily disagree with these takes, I think it's mainly people just engaging in a fleeting moment of viral, wholesome fun on TikTok. But if I did have to give my Vox-ass explaining sea shanties using music theory take, I'd say that there's some musical characteristics of sea shanties in particular that are uniquely suited to TikTok as a platform. And it's not because of the meme novelty, and it's not because of the lyrical content, the yearning for the sea. TikTok sea shanties are a novel form of musical antiphony. What exactly do I mean by that? Let's get into it. This video is brought...
So kind of interesting, because Neely seems to kind of have these thesis statements almost, right? He tells you, okay, this is what the video is going to be about. Now, he really had his thesis there at the end, right? That this is some sort of antiphony. So what does antiphony mean in music? Responsive alteration between two groups, especially of singers. So let's look here. All right, so here's an example of an antiphonal Kyrie. Let's see kind of what this is here. So you heard one choir sing one part, another choir sing the other part, but both choirs were on the stage at the same time. But they had this kind of back and forth. So I guess that's what kind of we're looking at when we have antiphony, right? When they have antiphonal singing here. All right, so hopefully now we understand a little bit more about what he's saying. He thinks that this is like a unique expression of antiphony, right? Let's actually kind of go back and see what he says.
And it's not because of the meme novelty, and it's not because of the lyrical content, the yearning for the sea. TikTok sea shanties are a novel form of musical antiphony. What exactly do I mean by that?
Okay, so a novel form of musical antiphony. So novel meaning like new and not resembling something formerly known or used. That's the definition here from Merriam-Webster. So a new form of antiphony.
Long-haul shanties, or halyard shanties, were for things like hoisting sail, which features 2 bars of a call from a shantyman,
hurrah, hurrah for young Sally Racket,
followed by 2 bars of a response from the crew, with 2 strong musical accents per chorus.
Holler away, hurrah, hurrah for young Sally Racket, holler away,
The SpongeBob SquarePants theme would work quite well as a halyard shanty. Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? SpongeBob SquarePants. Hand-over-hand shanties were for lighter tasks like hauling slacks of rope. They're generally faster with a musical accent on every beat and a kind of lilt to them.
Brandy and wine, whiskey and soda, hey, hey, Shanty go.
Short drag shanties were for tasks that required a large burst of musical energy. The musical accent always occurs on the last syllable of the chorus, presumably to get the crew pumped to pull.
All on the bowling, homeward we are going.
All on the bowling,
All on the bowling.
I wonder if this bit here is more speculation. Right? Like he said, oh, this is for when you need a burst of musical energy because there's an accent at the end. And it's like, is it? Like we kind of saw with the film how they were pulling the rope on the beat, and that seemed to work really well. But for this, it's like, how does he know, I guess? How does he know that this is what this was used for? Did it come from one of the sources, or is he just kind of speculating that this is how it works? I don't know. Let's see.
Before she starts to roll.
If you notice, the musical rhythm here is quite strange. Sounds like the crew is like rushing the shantymen or something.
The skipper's breather.
Yeah, I was wondering if he was going to say something about that, because the crew kind of like jumps a little bit, right? When the shantyman gets to the end of the line, they kind of jump their part, and then he also kind of interjects a little bit. And I guess what the effect kind of gets for me is that it has this sense of kind of like pushing forward, right? So you're never like sitting back waiting for someone else to start. You're like starting as soon as you can with the next bit, which has a nice kind of drive and energy to it. So that's what I think is, at least musically, that's kind of the impression that I'm getting.
Growling.
On the bowling
Were you rushing or were you dragging?
This kind of broken rhythm is by design, actually. In 1927, William Saunders wrote that for a shanty, quote, to be even tolerably effective, it must be sung with a great expression which entails a certain amount of broken rhythm. There's almost this overlap between shantymen and crew. The musical pulse is not steady. It's not something that you can dance to. That overlapping effect is even more pronounced in this recording of the same shanty, where the haul of the crewman overlaps with the haul of the shantyman.
All on the bowling to Bristol we are going. All on the bowling, all on the bowling.
Which is kind of interesting then, because why would you have that last measure? It's almost as like if we're in two parts here, right? The shantyman and the crew, then it's like where the crew ends, the shantyman begins. And that's a really common technique to kind of overlap or elide those two things. So really, I guess what he wanted to show here is that the crew ends here, but he could have also shown that that's where the shantyman starts, which isn't, like I said, which isn't uncommon in any sort of, at least classical music tradition.
This is called elision. The phrases have been elided into one another, which creates a lot of forward musical momentum. You can hear it in other shanties like Bill Riley, where 3-bar phrases have the crew and the shantymen overlapping one another, creating a hectic and frenzied energy.
Oh, Billy Riley, Mr. Billy Riley. Oh, Billy Riley, oh, Billy Riley, Mr. Billy Riley. Oh, Billy Riley, oh, Billy Riley, Mr. Billy Riley.
A.L. Lloyd would note that the sail would need to be light or the occasion desperate for men to haul at the halyards to the beat of such a fast song as Bill Riley. So when you actually listen to these field recordings of people doing work out at sea and actually pulling rope and moving the capstan, it becomes obvious that there's a certain kind of syllable combination that sea shanties, I guess, naturally default to. There's a lot of hauls and hoes and things like that on the moment of work, those musical accents. I thought I would talk a little bit with my mom, who's a voice teacher, to try and figure out exactly why those kinds of syllables were chosen for that moment of work.
It's often consonants like H, holler away, or shall that use a lot of air. If I go, huh, and then let go of the throat, you feel the core pick up in a very vitalized way.
Hurrah, hurrah for young Sally Racketop.
Holler away, holler away.
If you put your finger in your belly button and go buh buh sh sh
Buh, buh, sh, sh.
you feel the movement there. It's setting up compression in the system.
Yeah, classic like voice thing, right? Which is always fun to listen to. But yeah, you can do the same thing. Really what you're feeling is that your core engages when you are like pulling or whatever, you're using your core. So by kind of already engaging that with your consonants and syllables, that I could see helps you like kind of get the work done and achieve this kind of effect.
Down the river.
Row, boys, row.
So you're either using H to get air started, or they're using consonants to set that compression up. That's how singing started. I mean, in order to activate things in the body, you used vowels and consonants in very specific ways. you're working with the large muscle groupings. So you exhale on the work, you exhale on the lift.
Hey ho.
Hey ho. Yeah. All right, love you.
Love you too.
Bye.
When you compare the cadences of these field recordings to the Wellerman, the viral sea shanty on TikTok, you realize that the Wellerman is not, in fact, a sea shanty. That is right, shanty talk is a lie. Because even though you can dance to it, it doesn't have a work song cadence, and specifically a sea shanty cadence. Army cadences do have that back and forth, but sea shanties have to be very particular. Rather, it's a folk sea song, very much in the style of artists like Stan Rogers, who popularized them in the 1970s with songs like Barrett's Privateers.
Okay, hold on. His argument is that what he laid out in his thesis, sea shanties are this unique form, this novel form of antiphony, which means that, as we saw in the example, right, you have two things going back and forth. Now that tracks with everything that he's shown us so far with the sea shanties. You have the shantyman and the crew going back and forth. So there's that antiphony. I would have to double check if call and response qualifies as antiphony, because what we saw with antiphony was that it's like two choirs singing. Whereas with call and response, you usually have like the leader who calls and then the rest of the people, whether it's the audience or congregation or whatever, that responds. So antiphony, like maybe it's the umbrella that call and response also fits into, but he says it's this novel form of antiphony, yet now he's saying that Wellerman isn't a sea shanty. So this seems to contradict his first point, how this is a novel form of antiphony when there is no antiphony in Wellerman. So let's see if he can like kind of rectify the situation.
Meme phenomenon of the Wellerman specifically actually predates TikTok and can be traced to the shanty band The Longest Johns, who featured it prevalently in a web series where they would sing to entertain unsuspecting players in the pirate-themed game Sea of Thieves.
Right. I want to give you guys so much money.
In October of 2020, TikTok user ForwardSpiral97 started posting memes featuring the Long John's original recording of the Wellerman. Soon after, on December 5th, Rye Smith posted himself singing an original recording of the Wellerman, and then proceeded to add harmonies to himself using TikTok's duet function. Others soon duetted his duet, making it, I guess, not a duet, and many chains broke off of Rye Smith's original. On December 27th, the Scottish postman Nathan Evans posted his original recording of the Wellerman, which soon broke off into a number of different duetted chains, this time featuring many bass and bass baritone singers, creating a very rich and warm a cappella texture, the kind that you rarely hear in popular music. The whole thing blew up in the mainstream when a video of Promise Uzawulu, initially skeptically reacting to his brother singing along with the Longest John's version of Wellerman, and then joining in with him, went viral.
My whole family that's over the Christmas break like, Dad, you're crazy. Get off the grog. No one is going to listen to sea shanties, and now they're blowing up online.
There are other shanties on TikTok, of course, besides the Wellerman, like the ones posted by Sam Pope.
Let's sing a sea shanty together.
Who posts videos with certain lyrics highlighted as a means of trying to encourage people to duet with him. In this way, the way that it's been set up, the person who sings first in the chain fills the role of the digital shantyman, and everybody else in the chain adding harmonies via the duet function fills the role of the crew, calling the response. Because there is a little bit of latency, and it does take a few moments to get oriented when you first press the record button through the duet function on TikTok, it's almost necessary for the first person in the chain to sing something solo, giving you time to orient yourself and begin to sing, creating this natural call and response pattern. And because of this, sea shanties in particular are a great resource for the technological limitations of the duet function.
I was way ahead of you on the whole.
Okay. Sea shanties are a great resource for the technological limitations. So what he's saying is basically the format of the sea shanty with this call and response works really well because the technology doesn't work right when you start recording, right? It kind of, like he says, it takes a second for you to get oriented.
Well, sea shanty thing. And now everyone knows that 2021 is the year of the sea shanty. Are you aware that 2021 is the year of the sea shanty? And you're like, I don't think so. Come on, Grandpa.
Yeah, they're fun and memey and piratey, but more importantly, there is a rapid back and forth between shantyman and crew. The technical term.
So you have the one guy singing, And then when we get to the Wellerman part, they go, soon may the Wellerman come. So if his definition for a sea shanty, which he says the Wellerman isn't, it's a like folk song, whatever, is that you have someone who calls and then the whole crew kind of responds. The Wellerman kind of follows that still, right? You have the one person who sings and then everyone else adds in their harmony at the Wellerman part. So wouldn't that follow this same kind of pattern that he said kind of established? Like maybe originally, right? Originally Wellerman wasn't a sea shanty. It was just this kind of folk song, everybody sang at the same time. But at least the way that we're seeing it presented today, it follows more of the sea shanty format that he is outlined in his video.
For music that features call and response between two different musical groups, in this case, shantymen and crewmen, is called antiphonal music, or antiphony. This particular kind of antiphony that comes from Southern Black work song and found its way into 19th century merchant ships through sea shanties can be found all over popular American song from the past 100 years. You hear it in rock and roll, My Generation by The Who.
This is what we're going to have to look at after the video. Is it call and response, or is it antiphony, or is it both, right? That's what we're going to have to figure out.
You hear it in jazz. Miles Davis's So What features antiphony between bass and the rest of the band. You hear it pretty prevalently in black gospel music, of course. Oh Happy Day is a perfect example of this. But you have probably experienced antiphony pretty directly and not through recording. Whenever this happens, for example, this is antiphony. This is call and response. When Ludacris says roll out, you say roll out. This is a powerful way of connecting everybody in the room. Communal singing goes very deep in musical cultures from around the world and is used very frequently in religious services because it's a way of making us feel much larger than ourselves. With no live concerts and no safe religious gathering in the past year, we have been cut off from this pretty profound aspect of our shared musical humanity. And so we've been left trying to find alternatives.
Since TikTok allows users to layer on each other's videos, you get awesome stuff like this.
TikTok's duet function makes this process frictionless. It's a lot easier to connect with other people. However, it comes with the caveat that antiphonal music is probably better suited for the platform. When you press record, you hear the person first in the chain, creating the call, and then you respond with your part, antiphony. So basically, the Wellerman is not a sea shanty, but when it's on TikTok, it has sea shanty-like properties. It is shanty adjacent. Because they are work songs, sea shanties by their very nature are messy, they're collaborative, and a lot of fun. That is my hot take. That is my Vox ass explaining sea shanties with music theory.
Hey!
Now, one thing I didn't talk about in this video that much is harmony. The specific kinds of harmony that was used both historically and in the TikTok trend. In the extended version of this video, I go into the harmonization techniques that were used back then and today, and how you might adopt them into the style of 18th century European musicians, as well as John Coltrane's giant steps. Soon may the Wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea, and you can only watch the extended version of this video exclusively.
Okay, I think the last bit of this is ads. Okay, so what we need to figure out, because he did address how like the Wellerman has taken on some sea shanty characteristics according to the definition that he laid out. So props to him for kind of tying that together. We need to figure out if call and response is the same as antiphony. Short answer, without maybe finding like a super reliable source, is that yes, call and response is known as antiphony. It's just different from like the example that we saw at the beginning, right? The video was kind of interesting. I understand that he saved some of the information for the extended version, some of the information that I would have liked to see in the video, but I get that like this is one of the ways that he can make money. So he's kind of saving that. Also, the harmony and everything I feel like is a little bit more nitty gritty. So it makes sense to have kind of more like a a different video to include all of that type of stuff. What he did talk about, though, was the form. Form is a part of music theory, right? So he mentioned how the shantyman would go back and forth between himself and the crew, and how that kind of worked. He also talked about the elided phrases, right, which is another kind of music theory thing. The first part, he talked a lot about the music history, and I think I'm going to skip probably most of that in my video because there wasn't much to say. I hope his sources are correct and that he pulled from reliable sources, got the information within the right context, that sort of thing. But there really wasn't a lot else, right? He spent most of the video on the history, which is cool. Like, that's good, but the history isn't really music theory. And I don't think it really made a context for the music theory any richer. It was interesting, don't get me wrong, and the information seemed good. If this was a video strictly about the music theory, then I would expect a little bit more of some of the harmony, that type of thing. Even if he just did a little overview and then had more in-depth stuff for his regular video, I think that would have been a little bit better. It looks like he got his terms correct here, though, with antiphony and call and response are the same thing. That was one that I wasn't sure about because at least when we looked at that example in the beginning, right, 2 whole choirs singing versus 1 person calling and then the response, that just seemed like a really big difference for me. But I guess all of that kind of just falls under the umbrella of antiphony. So that was kind of interesting because there's a lot of terms, a lot of things in music, and it's always good to double check, right? Because it's easy to think oh, I know what that means. I know how it applies to music. And then you look into it and it's different. Here's a great example of that. There is a published book out there by a major publishing company where the author in the introduction, it's a book on how to learn piano. The author explains that the circle of fifths is the flat keys, goes from C to F, because if you're going down, which he said this descending fifth is really common in music, C going down a fifth from C to F is the next key. So he says circle of fifths is flats and circle of fourths is sharps, which is the first time I've ever seen that. I've talked to a lot of music theorists, I've been in a lot of music theory classes, and it's always the other way around. You go up, ascending, C to G is the circle of fifths, which is the sharp side, and then the circle of fourths, C to F, right, would be then the flat side of the circle. If you're not sure what the circle of fifths or fourths is, you can look it up online. It's really easy to find. It just shows you all the possible keys in Western classical music. So it's, but that's the kind of thing. I wasn't sure about call and response, so I wanted to make sure that it really was a form of antiphony, which it is. So that's good to kind of know and refresh. So I think in conclusion, it would have just been great to have more music theory in the music theory video. I guess I haven't listened to a lot of Vox. He said this was supposed to be a Vox style sea shanty thing. So maybe Vox oftentimes includes the history, in which case that would kind of make sense following that same format. But for me, it would have made more sense to have brief history, more theory in a video that's supposed to be about the music theory. Otherwise, I don't think he really made his point. The final thing I want to actually look up before we go here is whether or not there's a quick answer to if sea shanties have to have this call and response. My guess is that he did enough research that that's true, but I'm just curious because like you said, the Wellerman is kind of sea shanty adjacent because it had this kind of call and response now in TikTok, but it doesn't really follow that formula if you're singing the original folk song. Okay, so the answer from marineinsight.com, which might be a reliable source, might not, but they say that typically a shanty was performed in call and response format in which one sailor would call out a verse, prompting the other sailors to respond in unison. I don't know, I'd have to do some more research to see if the Wellerman truly is just a folk song or if it can be seen as a sea shanty. Hey, so I'm talking to you from the future here, and I did a little more research, which means I read one New York Times article and found basically what I was kind of missing. According to David Coffin, who is a folk musician and music educator in Cambridge. Again, probably a reliable source, but it'd be nice to try and vet him a little bit more. He says that it's a wailing song with the beat of a shanty, but its purpose is that of a ballad, to tell a story, not to help sailors keep time. So that is the piece that was missing from Neely's video, was that this song, The Wellerman, is a ballad. That makes a lot more sense. I was sitting here trying to fit this folk song in with another group of folk songs, which is this kind of call and response, and thinking that maybe it had morphed or evolved over time to be more like this call and response feature, but actually it's a ballad. And like Mr. Coffin says, it's not the beauty of the song that gets people, it's the energy. That's one of the things I love about sea shanties, is the accessibility. So now he's talking about how sea shanties kind of have like this specific energy. I think there's enough there to even say like there's a sea shanty style, especially when you see a little earlier in the article, it says that some people have even begun covering popular songs like All Star by Smash Mouth in a sea shanty cadence. So to me, that means that they're basically using the style of sea shanties to cover other like popular songs. But what I kind of came to is that you have to look at the purpose, right? The purpose of the sea shanty was that kind of like helping productivity, engaging the core. You have the shantyman, the crew responds, helps keep morale up, that kind of thing. The purpose of the ballad, on the other hand, is to tell a story, which is what we get here. And nowadays, what we're hearing, I think, with the Wellerman, like on TikTok, people are performing the Wellerman, but in a sea shanty style. So I think this is really what was missing. Why I felt like I needed to do a little bit more research, that there was something that Adam Neely didn't quite cover, is, he said the Wellerman now is sea shanty adjacent. What I would say is it's not sea shanty adjacent, but rather it's a ballad that is now being performed in more of the like sea shanty style. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.